Hello again, you sick, twisted weather freaks, and welcome to another fun-filled, action-packed, and intellectually stimulating edition of This Week in Weather. It's Thanksgiving night. I should be in bed. It's 1 a.m., but instead I'm making videos. I'm meteorologist DT from Weather Risk, the commander of chaos, the colonel of confusion, the captain of catastrophe. Let's talk about this week in weather. Our topics this week will be the Ohio Valley and New England low coming up here in a couple of days, the pattern at the end of November, and a possibility of a mid-Atlantic snow threat, just a possibility, on November 30th. The first week of December, and then some uncertainty developing the pattern after December 8th. There's a picture of my smiling face from Richmond, Virginia, and that's how you can reach me on my Verizon, my Gmail. There's my Twitter account. There's the Facebook page. Alright, this here is our surface map as of Thursday night. And you can see the high pressure very nicely over, I guess it's Buffalo. And the warm front was separating a distinct change in the air masses running right along here. You can definitely see that. And when we take a look at that and we enlarge it, we'll see some significant differences. Now, the air north of the front is quite cold, so that is quite noticeable. And if we take a look at the actual operations here, the conditions, the temperatures, notice that in this whole area, we have temperatures around 30 degrees, 32 degrees. The dew points are in the teens. But behind the front, take a look over here. We can see temperatures in the mid 30s, upper 40s, with dew points above 32 degrees. So any precipitation south of this front is all rain, whatever falls here. Now, later on, we will see precipitation developing here and pushing into this cold air, but the cold air is not going to be that deep. This here is the 0Z early, the new Friday early morning NAM model. You can see a little bit of sleet and freezing rain here around 5 a.m. in the portions of the Shenandoah Valley, but it rapidly falls apart as the rain comes northward. And most of Saturday does look like it's going to be a washout. There's no doubt about that. So you should be prepared for significant rain all day Saturday. And again, this sleet and freezing rain in the Shenandoah Valley will change over by, I would think, 9 or 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. Right, this image here shows the overall hemispheric pattern, and we can see this again. This is as of Thursday midday. Four distinct areas of troughs. You can see one here, one here, one here, and of course one here. And notice we also have the ridges pushing in this direction. We have a ridge coming in here, you see this, and this one in here. So it's a pretty equal pattern. Now this feature right in here, this is where the polar vortex should be, but it's not. What's happening is we have a bubble of high pressure here. So this is a negative Arctic oscillation is what we have here. No doubt about that. Right in this area, negative Arctic oscillation. Now over here, we may have the polar vortex over here, over North America. But an important point here is we have a four-wave pattern, which is fairly stable, and a negative Arctic oscillation. All right. Now let's take a look at our teleconnections. Now remember what our teleconnections are. The teleconnections are essentially the upper atmosphere patterns across North America. So, for example, let's take a look here briefly to remind you. This is the EPO in here, and the EPO represents when the ridge on the west coast goes up to Alaska. Instead of having ridge here like this, the ridge goes up to Alaska. See this? That's when the EPO is negative. And the PNA, of course, this is the ridge on the west coast. And when you have a negative PNA, you have a trough on the west coast. So there you go. Arctic oscillation when it's negative in a week, which means the cold air can come southward. And the NAO when it's negative means that you have a blocking pattern over Greenland, so low pressure areas have to stay to the south. So as we take a look at these, we see the PNA is fairly strong early on, but then notice what happens by the time we get to the end of December. It begins to weaken significantly. The NAO is strongly negative. Yay, we like that. But again, by December 6th or 7th, it goes to almost neutral. And the Eastern Pacific oscillation is slightly positive, then slightly negative here. So kind of a mixed bag in terms of teleconnections. Now this here is the European Arctic oscillation. And you can see that over the next few days here, the models clearly have it being quite negative. Again, we're looking at the green here, the mean. So you can see it's quite negative on November 25th, and then all the way through until at beginning of December. Really, it stays slightly negative, which is an interesting development. All right, now this is an enlargement of this image. We're going to take a look at just North America here. And you can see several features here. First, this here is the big trough on the east coast. There's another one right here coming into the west coast. In between we have a ridge. Okay, so the flow is out of the northwest here. It's nice and cold. And it's essentially a two-wave pattern here. And we have some ridging here and another ridging here. But as you can see, those are our two big troughs. All right, now we take a look at early next week, and we can see Sunday night low pressure coming out of Indiana, which moves up into the western Great Lakes, into eastern Lake Huron, I should say. So here's the low right here, and then it goes up over here. But as it does so, there's a triple point. This low sends out a cold front, which will include right here. A new low will form on the New England coast. And notice the wind at this point is still out of the southeast, so it's mostly rain over New England. But as it gets more developed, the two systems separate. So this low is over here, and this low is over here. Notice we have now north winds coming in this direction, and it turns over to all snow. And they get heavy snow in New England on Tuesday afternoon. So there you go. Central and northern New England, pretty significant snowstorm possible for that area. Okay. Let's take a look at the pattern now as of November 27th. So what we have here is this big storm, which we saw here, over the eastern Great Lakes, which is supported by the upper air pattern. And there we are. Now again, you can notice this monster trough here. All right, and we have a bit of ridge here and a bit of ridge here. But these ridges are connected to this upper trough. They're not really real ridges. Real honest to God ridges. Mostly because of this big upper low feature here being so strong, you have to have a ridge behind it and a ridge ahead of it. But it's not a real negative NAO per se or positive PNA. All right, let's take a look at November 30th. Now this is interesting coming up here. Now this is the European model as of, well, this is the 12Z run, and it's valid the 29th, 168 hours out. So let's talk about some features here. Obviously, you can see a lot of energy coming in from the Pacific Ocean here and here and here. See how the Pacific Ocean is splitting? So this is going over the block. Here's our block right here. And it's coming around this upper low, the ocean low. There you go. And that's the potential for a snowstorm if something is in the southern jet stream. And as you can see, there is a piece of energy right here in the southern jet stream. You see how the isobars there, the height lines bend right here. There is a low pressure area in this area according to this. Now we do have this blocking pattern here and this upper low here. So these two features they're kind of wrapped up in each other. And as a result, this low is going to have to stay to the south. Meanwhile, you have more energy coming in all the time. So if we take a look at what this looks like, this is the European model at the surface. And we can see that as of Friday, November 30th, it has a decent area of high pressure, pretty strong right here, with cold air damming down the coast and low pressure here over western Kentucky like this. Now this looks like an ice storm or snow to ice over much of the mid-Atlantic before it goes over, and then the European model takes that low from western Kentucky up into Ohio and towards Buffalo. And obviously this would be a much warmer scenario with a lot of the precipitation changing over to rain. Now this is the GFS parallel model, which is the new run of the parallel, and it's got some interesting features here. If you compare it to the European, notice that the European has a much stronger shortwave in the southern jet stream. See this here? Now let's take a look at the European, the GFS I should say, and you can see that it has much weaker shortwave here. This whole thing is much weaker. And there's another big system coming into California like this. And you can see that on the European model, we don't have that. That system coming into California is slower and weaker. This one right here. So this is the main one right here. Okay. So if we look at the surface map for the GFS, again, this is the upper air map. It only shows, as you can see, a weak system right here. And we, not to expect anything. Sure enough, if we look at the surface map, oh, there we go. The surface map for GFS, and you can see nothing, absolutely nothing. High pressure over the area on November 29th and November 30th. And if we look at the European ensemble, it also shows, again, pronounced blocking here, 50-50 low here, energy coming in this way, but there is something here which could develop on the European model. So that's all something to watch out for. And in fact, that actually shows up. This is on the European operational run. This is valid for the 29th into the 30th. And we can clearly see high pressure, very strong high pressure over Western Ontario pushing down this way, and low pressure like this. And you can see the rain snow lines are down in Virginia. But the issue is obviously what happens to it from here. And you can see 180 hours. This is the new GFS. Now, this just came out here only an hour or two ago. So this is the brand new 0Z Monday GFS. Now notice that it has low pressure here and like this. Okay. Now this big high pressure would be strong enough to keep the precipitation all snow in most of Virginia and portions of North Carolina if this low gets close enough. It may not, but this is a big trend northward in the GFS. So the GFS may be playing catch up here. Again, the key to this feature developing is this feature right here. That's the key to the system developing and coming up the coast and sliding out to sea. You can see it again on the GFS, it's much weaker, but the new GFS, maybe the model is showing something trying to develop here. All right, first week of December, the pattern does not look great. Clearly what happens is we have the polar vortex developing this shape, which is west to east, which is terrible. And you have a big trough here in the Midwest, a bit of a ridge here on the East Coast and on the West Coast. So this is a Midwest trough is what this is, type of weather pattern. And it's not great for the East Coast. Now what happens is on the GFS ensemble and the European ensemble, the trough does slide to the east and we get some ridging on the West Coast. So the pattern turns seasonally cold. You can see the ridge here like this. There's our trough in here, and here's the trough here, and we have a bit of a ridge like this. So nothing too spectacular, but definitely something to watch. Okay. If we take a look at the MJO, Maddie and Julian oscillation, again, we're looking at the green lines here. What we want to see is, okay, this is the forecast on the 18th, the end of November. You can see it there. So let's take a look at these lines here. And you can see they go around this way, 7, 8, 1. And then here again, 7, 8, 1. And then here again, phase 8 and phase 1. All these different models. Okay, well, what does that mean in terms of actual weather? For December, phase 1, as you can see, is pretty cold over the Midwest, the upper plains, and into the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, and there's also a lot of rain or precipitation on the East Coast. So this could be a snowstorm pattern according to the MJO. And if we look at the actual pattern here, during the MJO in El Nino in phase 1, we can see low pressure right here developing. This is our big block right in here, and then this here is low pressure like this developing off the coast of New Jersey or Massachusetts and becoming a big coastal storm. So we'll see. Another way of looking at this is taking a look at the analog method. Now this is the day 11 analog method from the CPC. What they did was they took these dates here and moved them over here, and you can see in this whole area. And what they did was this is for day D11 for the 11 to 15 day. So for the 16 to 20 day, they did day 16 or day 20. So the first date would be on November 30th, 1974. It's actually for the 16 to 20 day, it would be December 7th, 1974, and so on and so forth. So when you did that, you came up with this. You can see it's pretty cold over the East Coast, but it's also pretty dry. Now the European weeklies looks fairly promising. I've seen people post this one for December 8th, and they look at this negative anomaly over New England, and they go, wow, that's going to be a big snowstorm for the East Coast. Well, here's the problem with that. This is all New England. All right, and the question is, how does it get there? How does it take that track? Because if we look at the update, we'll see, here's the problem. The negative anomaly, or the short wave, is clearly in the central Tennessee Valley, and then it goes into the Ohio Valley in New England. So does this. That's not a track for Virginia or Maryland, or even Pennsylvania for that matter. So that's not a great track at all. If that's correct, it might not be correct. The CFS looks cold, as you can see, big ridge on the west coast, trough in the east, and it remains fairly cold in week 2. If we look at the teleconnections again in more detail, we can see the Arctic oscillation stays generally negative, fairly strongly negative, and then rises a little bit. The North American oscillation is negative and goes to neutral by the first weekend in December. And then here we can see that the P&A pattern, which is positive with the ridge on the west coast, goes to neutral down here, and the EPO is negative all the way through. Okay, so this is the European weeklies. Now this is again, so we have the Arctic oscillation indicates that the some of the European weekly climate models indicate that. So does the overall teleconnections and weather patterns and dates indicate a cold first half of December. So, but if we look at the European models, they're different. The European models show a very pronounced positive EPO, big, huge upper low over Alaska and the Gulf of Alaska, and this sends the temperatures going zonal, which forces everybody to buy their or not buy their heating oil early. I mean, you don't need to in this sort of pattern. And we can see the how warm it gets too as well. Look at these temperatures. Out to December 15th, out to December 17th. It's pretty warm over the plains and Midwest on the East Coast. Everywhere, really. It's pretty warm everywhere. So one thing that somebody else did was they took a look at these top 10 analogs, but not for the top 10, for the top 20, for the Arctic oscillation, the NAO, and the PNA. And the weather decision, what they came up with was this. This is in the 15 to 30 day forecast. Notice that the Arctic oscillation generally favors colder than normal temperatures over Minnesota, the Great Lakes, and New England. The NAO, pretty strong indication according to the weather decisions analog here, that it would be a cold pattern for most of February. And then this is also the PNA pattern based upon the current data and what that looks like for the middle of December with a big trough on over the eastern United States and still running quite cold. So that's the forecast, that's the video. The November 30th one has possibilities. It's going to be the only thing that I see coming down the road for the Mid-Atlantic region for the next couple of weeks. And then there is some possibility the pattern might break down after December 8th, but it's not decisive. Like you can see here, a lot of these teleconnections are indicating a fairly cold pattern into the first or second week of December. So we'll see how that plays out. This is meteorologist DT from Weather Risk. I'll see you on the Twitter page and on the Facebook page.